Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to Logtech Live, the latest episode of Logtech Live. It's April 5th. Spring is in the air, at least in the DC area. Things are turning from brown to green, which is always nice. It's a little more invigorating and energizing to see flowers and plants and stuff than just sort of bare tree limbs. So really excited for this episode today. I have someone who's extremely passionate about a topic that I've covered my entire career and which has really become a big issue since and during and after the pandemic. So really excited to talk with her in a bit. But before I do, first of all, welcome to everyone. If this is your first time catching the episode, really delighted to have you here. And if not, if you're a regular viewer, thank you so much for your support. As I always say, I only do this show because of you. So thanks again for tuning in. Couple things to mention before I get to news of the week. Break bulk is a little less than 3 weeks away now. There's still plenty of time to register. The Journal of Commerce Break Bulk and Project Cargo Conference. It's in New Orleans, the Big Easy, April 24th through 26th. I will be there. You can use the code that's scrolling below to get 25% off a ticket. There's still plenty of time. We have great attendance. The agenda is awesome. Go to the links in the comments to click on to register and also to look at the agenda. I'll be leading a session about why the project and break bulk space have sort of lagged from a technology perspective. It's a great session. It's going to be really good. We've done a lot of prep on this. And for once, I only have one session at a conference instead of like 10. So I really get to focus on this one session and do a great job, like really focusing on it. So the other thing I wanted to mention conference-wise, the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference is coming up in September. You've heard me reference it before. The agenda went live just this last week. So it is up. And I highly encourage you to take a look at it. The registration has been open for a couple of weeks, but we posted the initial agenda. And why is that important? Well, we're 6 months out from the event, right? Like if you go to most events that are being held in the fall, they don't have much of an agenda, right? The program is sort of like TBD, check back later. That's not how we work. We know exactly what we want to talk about. We know who we want to be there to talk about it. That's because the editorial at JOC, Journal of Commerce, feeds directly into what we talk about at events. They're one and the same. So we are not looking for speakers, a month before. We are not trying to decide what we want to talk about after everybody is gathered. We know exactly what the topics are and what we want to talk about. So definitely encourage you to register, get in early. This is the best pricing you're going to get for this event. It's a great event. It's a sneakily good event. It's people who've been there, they will tell you it's a super insightful event. And that's mostly because my colleagues, Bill Cassidy and Ari Ash, are there leading amazing discussions with all of the biggest newsmakers and leaders in the ground and surface transportation space. So really hope to see you in Chicago, September 30th through October 2nd. Let's go to news of the week. I think since our last episode, the whole Baltimore bridge situation has happened, but I'm not going to do that because you've probably read a million stories about the Baltimore situation. And I mean, obviously there's some tech angles to it in terms of how tech is used to divert cargo or, kind of contingency plans. But again, you're probably all Baltimore'd out at this point. So I'm going to focus on some other things that we've reported on over the last couple of weeks. I wrote a story that a couple of weeks ago about a group of shippers and associations that are urging the DCSA, which we've talked about a lot on this show, Digital Container Shipping Association, to adopt standards, actually the members of the DCSA, the shipping line members, to adopt the standards that the DCSA, the association they pay to create, has made around shipping schedules. So in other words, make shipping schedule data and formatting standardized and interoperable across all of the carriers to make it easier for all the companies that have to manage with those schedules to do business across carriers, right? So 44 companies put their name to the signature, put their signature to this letter to the DCSA members saying, and not just the members, to the CEOs of the carriers saying, please adopt these standards. It will make our life easier. There's no competitive advantage to you having different formats for your schedules. So really interesting. Definitely encourage you to look at the story. The next story I wanted to highlight was one that I just posted a couple days ago on Journal of Commerce, joc.com, which is a partnership between FourKites, the visibility provider, and BICO. Now, why is that interesting? Could we have the next image? There we go. Perfect. Why is this interesting? FourKites, been around for a while. BICO, you may or may not have heard of them. They're a France-based global TMS provider. Why is this interesting? Well, superficially, it's not unusual that a visibility provider and a TMS provider are partnering with one another. Happens a lot. Most of these companies are finding ways to partner with one another. Why this is interesting? A couple of reasons. One, it just shows we're in a phase of the sort of software market where companies are seeing that are realizing that they don't have the resources, and nor should they build everything themselves. It's really all about integrating parts together to make them more digestible and valuable for end users. It's not about one company building a true end-to-end platform for absolutely everything: execution, planning, tracking, all that. So this is another example of that happening. It's also interesting, which I dive into because it shows the complexity of getting ocean milestones, accurate milestones from ocean shipments, continues to be a problem, right? FourKites, and I go through this in the story, FourKites has been through a number of different permutations trying to incorporate ocean information, ocean milestones, ocean data into their broader aggregated platform of shipping milestones across modes. Very strong in truckload, very strong on the surface side. But ocean, obviously, as we have seen, whether it's Baltimore, Red Sea, COVID, congestion, right? All of the ocean has become a super important part, and the demand is there, but it's really hard getting accurate data, right? So as I mentioned in the story, FourKites has set up this partnership, but they have partnerships with other global TMS providers because it's important to tap into whoever has the feeds with the carriers and getting those milestones into a single place for a shipper to make it as easy as possible for them to see a shipment across modes. So very, very interesting. I think we're now going to re-accelerate this sort of partnership and integration focus between software vendors that I wrote about a lot, actually, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, but then everyone got a lot of money, and I think they got ambitions about being kind of like that true one place where everyone goes, but that's not really how the industry works. So definitely encourage you to read that story. The last story I wanted to highlight is from my colleague, Michael Angel, who wrote an interesting story earlier this week about yet another FMC claim from a shipper. Remember, pre-pandemic, shippers would never make claims against carriers at the FMC level because they were worried about getting shut out of the market. That's not the case anymore. FMC welcomed, and we'll go into this in my talk in a second with my guest, but the FMC welcomed complaints from shippers in a way that they had never done before. And that has really opened up a can of worms. We've seen a flood of complaints, some of them from big shippers. And in this case, it was Samsung filing a complaint against OOCL and its subsidiary, Costco and its subsidiary OOCL around detention and demurrage charges that they don't feel were appropriate. So we'll keep tracking this particular situation, but it feeds into a much bigger picture of D&D billing, which also came to light because a couple months ago, there was a ruling from the FMC saying that D&D bills had to go directly to shippers. They couldn't be billed to intermediaries such as drayage providers that had no part of the contract between the shipper and the carrier. So Definitely read that story from Michael. He's been killing it on JOC.com the last few weeks across a number of areas, from Baltimore to FMC stuff to even Supreme Court stuff with the Port of South Carolina, or South Carolina Ports Authority. So definitely go and check out all his work. But the D&D situation leads directly into my guest this week. So I would love to welcome Sara Dandan, who is CEO of a company called FourOneOne. Sara, so glad you can make it to the show today. Really delighted you're here.
I'm glad to be here, Eric. Thank you.
Okay, so before we get into why you're here and what we really want to talk about, can you give people a little bit of your background? What is, before you even get to FourOneOne, what have you done? What's your history in the industry? What's like, who is Sara?
Well, my dad was a freight forwarder and he owned his own freight forwarding company. And we used to go to his office when we were in school, particularly when I was in high school, and we'd go hang out with him there. Um, and, I graduated from college and he said, why don't you come work for me? I'm kind of reaching the end of wanting to do this, myself. So come on down and do this with me. And so I went to work for him, and it was a small operation, but I'm not going to name drop who it was, but our main client was one of the largest companies in the world, and we basically handled all of their export from the United States to a particular region of the world. So it was a trial by fire, let's put it that way, right? So I worked for him for a couple of years, and then he decided, he didn't want to do it anymore. He wanted to move and retire. And I kind of wondered, what am I going to do myself, now? You know, it was a strange time. I think it was around the crash, like the 2008 crash too, and everybody was kind of hurting, and so I said, let me try something else, and I opened up an e-commerce business actually for about 5 years,
Okay.
which did really well, until it didn't. As those things go. But I found that my favorite part of doing that was operations. I mean, it's in my blood. It's what I did. It's what I enjoy. So
Yep.
I said, my heart's, I'm not gonna be on beast mode all the time when it comes to, having an e-commerce business. That's, my heart's in the supply chain community. I went and I opened up my own shop. I own a NVO and freight forwarder.
Yep.
So I've consulted. I'll wrap it up. I've consulted
No,
for
okay.
years, and people, I guess, always kind of liked how I disputed things. We'll put it that way. And when we had this kind of COVID pandemic insanity go on, a lot of people came to me and they said, can you help me, help me dispute this? Or what would you do if you were me? Um, I approach things academically. So my knowledge of the Shipping Act and all of the rules is basically at this point almost like encyclopedic.
Yeah.
And that
I
kind
can
of just
vouch for that.
evolved.
I can vouch for that. In conversation with Sara, she knows like incredible details about the act. So yeah.
Yeah, I study a lot, and so it just kind of like morphed from there. And I love being able to help people, and businesses of all size. And one thing I noticed, I don't care if it's if it's a single person or if it's a huge shop with hundreds of employees. These people are frustrated, and these people are upset, and these people just want help.
Yeah.
And, so I always tell people now, freight forwarding is my passion, but what I'm doing now is my calling. Um, and I mean, it's worked out pretty well. I mean, if you had told me I was going to be doing this full time 2 years ago, I would have said, oh, you're crazy. But I think all of the skills I've accrued and all the knowledge I've accrued and, the goodwill of the community that I'm very proud to be a part of, You know, it's been a journey, it's been a ride, but you know, it's been a fun one, it's been an exciting one, and you know, I'm just, you know, I want to leave it a little bit better than I found it. So we'll see how that works
Well,
out.
so give people, you've alluded to it, but what exactly are you doing at 411? Like what made you switch or not switch, but like kind of refocus from the forwarding side to this sort of 411, you know, subsidiary or spinoff or whatever you want to characterize it as?
You know, I just again, I love freight forwarding. I mean, it's even in my LinkedIn headline that I'm a freight forwarding fanatic. And besides loving alliteration, it's because I truly am. But you know, I just think if you know me and you know my personality, and you know I kind of always root for the underdog, and I'm always that person that people come, can you help me with this? You know, and I think doing this, it really kind of like nourishes me and feeds me in a way that, you know, as
No,
much as I
but
love
Sarah,
freight
what
forwarding,
is 411? Give people
I,
a, yeah,
so,
you're putting the cart before the horse here.
so yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we it started off kind of as an auditing firm that
Okay.
would also do D&D disputes for people.
Yep.
But you know, the customer's always right, and nobody cared really about the auditing, no matter how much I pushed
Right.
them towards it. Hey, I have your invoices already. Let me do it. Um, but you know, people just wanted, you know, from my business anyway, the D&D disputes. So what we do is we help individuals or businesses with their disputes, on the carrier level, and if it goes to the FMC level. I always try to avoid going to the FMC. You know, it's time consuming. They're busy, we're all busy, but it depends, I think, on the carrier, and
Yeah.
usually the amount of the bill in question.
It's easier
Uh,
to get the money back from the shop than to chase the credit card company to get you reimbursed, right? Like that sort of same mentality, right? So,
yeah, but you know, it's odd. Like I've had carriers fight with us for months over $2,000, and you know, it just drawn out, protracted over 2 grand, and it's like, you know, we have proof, we have all this, like, just why? You know,
yeah.
I can't answer to that. And then you've got some who are just, okay, well, all right, you're right, boom. So there seems to be kind of no rhyme or reason. I don't know, maybe it's just the mood they're in that day or
Could very well be.
something, but
And so you're assisting for other forwarders and shippers with disputes, and A, is that correct? And B, is are they turning to you because because they don't have the expertise to chase this, or it's just inconvenient for them to chase this and they want someone who's like really good at it to just focus on it? What's kind of the driver for them to come to you on it?
well, our client base is you know, BCOs, drayage providers, and forwarders and NVOs.
Okay.
You know, when I started this, I thought it was going to be mostly BCOs. Honestly, I thought that was pretty much the customer base, but I'm actually getting more forwarders slash NVOs and drayage providers who come to me.
Yeah.
You know, some of it, a lot of it's word of mouth. I have some maritime attorneys who will refer people to me. I've got, you know, fellow freight forwarders, just people in the industry who kind of have seen my work or just know how passionate I am about it and will guide people towards me. Uh, you know, so it, it's odd to me. you know, like I said, the customer is always right, you know, and I don't think I realized myself how many forwarders and drayage providers were being kind of just saddled with these bills. Um, and I think they don't, they know the rules, right? But knowing the rules and kind of knowing how to get what you want from them can kind of be two different things.
Yeah.
A lot of this is um, like more academic, right? So you can like look at something and you can say, okay, they you know, they broke the rules. This is against the regulations. But then how do you argue that?
Yeah.
You know, and I think part of the problem is because I see, you know, I see their emails, and they'll write to the carrier and say you're in violation of 41102C and this, that, or the other, and the carrier is like, okay, you know, well, we don't think so, and it's a war of attrition in a lot of ways. So
I
how do you kind of fight against that when you're running a business too? I mean, it's time consuming. And a lot of people just don't have the resources and the knowledge to go up against a carrier and their team of lawyers, right? And then the FMC, that's made up of basically almost all attorneys as well. So they come to me, and when I tell them too that I'm a licensed forwarder and NVO, there's almost like a palpable sigh of relief, like like she knows, like she's
She's
one
one
of
of us.
us. And I can
Well,
approach things from that angle, that I think a lot of people can't, because I've lived it.
yeah.
I know it. I understand it.
I'm glad you brought up the attritional aspect of this, because I have a theory that pre-pandemic, I mean, D&D has been an issue for like as long as I can remember being in this industry, right? But I feel like it went from an annoyance pre-pandemic to an existential thing during the pandemic, and now it's carried through to now that there's seemingly a mechanism, or it's more accepted to challenge these things beyond just, hey, an email to a carrier or terminal saying, I think you misbilled me here. But all of that said, the attritional part of this has not gone away. And we've talked about this a lot. Like, someone from the outside could say, well, there's a dispute process now in place. You're going to get your money back. But for a small business, or even a large business that's essentially has tens to maybe hundreds to, obviously we've even heard of 7 figures of incorrectly billed D&D, just kind of like tied up for months and months on end, can be a really challenging thing, and probably even catastrophic for some companies, right? So I'm glad you brought up that, because I think that's something that's still misunderstood, even as it seems like there's been attempts through the OSRA reform and FMC rulemaking, which we'll get into, to address some of these issues. It's still the process itself is still such a major problem.
Yeah, and attorneys are really good at stretching the clock out in their
Prolonging
favor.
things.
Exactly.
Apologies for any attorneys who are chiming in. I think you'll probably agree, even if you can't say it out loud. But yeah,
it's a compliment in a way.
yes.
I mean, it's part of their job to do it. I understand it. But if you're just a forwarder or a BCO or a drayage provider, again, how do you kind of counter that, right? When it's literally their job, and they're used to it and they're very good at it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good kind of point, is that there's a 3-year clock too, right?
Yes.
So it's in their best interest to stretch that out, and the FMC process isn't exactly, even with the charge complaints, it's not exactly like here we go, it's done. It's
Let's
still,
get into
I mean,
that. I had that on my list of questions, and I think this is what when we first chatted, this is what you tried to walk me through. And honestly, I was so thick brained about it that I still don't know if I fully grasp the difficulty in kind of managing. Let's take people foundational level. What are the various avenues? Let's say you're a forwarder, you're a drayage carrier, you're a shipper, you feel you've been improperly billed, you go to the carrier, you get no joy. What are your avenues after that?
Okay, so at the very lower level, there's CATERS, and that's the Consumer Affairs Dispute Resolution Services, and they basically act as mediators. And it's kind of mandated in the Shipping Act that they exist, and they do this, but the they're very helpful, but carriers can refuse to work with them. They can refuse the mediation. So if you say I have a problem with X carrier, and Caters goes to X carrier. X carrier can just say, well, we don't want to participate. Caters just has to go, okay, you know. So I mean,
Yeah.
but they do help. I think they're more useful maybe for individual shippers
Yeah.
who might have a shipment in progress and kind of need them to step in and say to the carrier, oh, hey, this is going on and this person's concerned about it. Oftentimes that can kind of result in the carrier saying, oh, okay, I better fix whatever is going on right now.
Yeah.
And it's free, so that's good. And then I would say kind of the next step up from that is are the charge complaints, the new charge complaints. Um,
This is
those are
which
free
is part
too.
that's part of the OSHA rewrite, Ocean Shipping Reform Act 2.0 that came out in 22, I want to say, right? Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
No,
Just
no, no,
wanted to
you're good. So yeah, that's part of OSHA 2022, and it's applicable to all cases after June of 2022. Um, and that's their new kind of like streamlined, easy, I guess,
the fast track process.
fast track
Yeah.
mechanism.
Yeah.
But even so, it still takes months. It depends, I think, on the case. Uh, it's new, and I think they're still working out a lot of the kinks. I'm not convinced I would use it for all of my disputes, just because I think there's some things that they're still working out with it.
Mhm.
But if I had something like smaller, that I think could just get handled like, super fast and okay, just file a charge complaint, and we're good to go.
But you do have to pay for that one.
No, that one's
That's also
free,
free.
which is also one of kind of the benefits of
Okay.
it. So if you're a shipper and you want to do it yourself, um, go for it. Try it out and see, I think that's really I think that's their goal with it, is to kind of just be able to give people agency in the process.
So you don't have to
Again,
hire an
though,
attorney that may cost you more than what you're trying to even claw back in the first place.
I
Right.
think that's the idea.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you're still dealing with attorneys on the carrier side, and then the investigators at the FMC are attorneys as well.
Right.
So I think if you can't like
You
manage it, I
you
mean, I
essentially
guess
need
in
a
a way,
representation anyway because you're dealing with lawyers on the other parties, right? So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. But I mean, I think it has a lot of promise. Again, we'll see how it shapes up, and I do still have some concerns with it. That's another conversation for another day. Um, so from there on, you have what they call informal complaints, which is their small claims. That costs right now, I think the price went up to $176, and that's more formatted like I guess like a legal submission. You have to file in a certain format. It goes before a small claims officer who will adjudicate it for you. So that's like they call it informal, but then they call it small claims. So you can do that again. You can do that one yourself.
Yep.
But then again, you're dealing with attorneys on the other side, and you have to know that this is being read and
Yep.
adjudicated by attorneys. And I've seen some of these small claims filings that people have done on their own behalf, and you know they're trying, right? um but I think they would have maybe benefited from a little guidance. We'll put it that way. But if you're confident that you know what you're doing, and you're in a terrible bind, go for it. The FMC loves to have these things brought to light,
Yep.
and absolutely, 100%. It's a viable option. And then from there we have the formal complaints. That's your Samsung versus OOCL and Costco's, where it's usually K Street law firms or white shoe law firms going toe to toe against each other. And those are those are the big money ones usually. Or what a lot of people don't know is that the informal complaint process can also be rejected by the carrier. So the carrier can say, I don't want to do small claims. I want formal procedures. And then it gets bumped up
Interesting.
to a formal complaint. Yeah. So I think,
And
the
by
carriers can.
the way, on the formal complaint side, we've seen a lot that are not huge amounts of money, right? Like, I mean, I can
Yeah.
recall an early in the process, early in this new kind of revised environment, there were claims, formal charges, formal complaints that were maybe about $22,000 in, which is not a small amount of money, but it's also not like millions of dollars, right? And the amount of time invested in on all sides in rectifying that is probably more than the amount that was trying to be clawed back. But it's obviously at that point, it's about the principle and about sort of setting a precedent on the FMC side. Is a shipping line sort of doing this? Is there a pattern of them doing this and not, fixing the things that led to it, essentially? So,
Yeah, I forgot to mention that the small claims process has a $50,000 ceiling. So if it's more than $50,000, then you have to do a formal complaint.
yeah.
But you can do a charge complaint too. If it's eligible for a charge complaint, there's no kind of a limit, there's no threshold. But yeah, I mean, you bring up something I think that's really important. This maybe potentially landmark, I think it was TCW versus Evergreen case that's in the district court right now that we've been waiting. We've been waiting on that ruling for months. That's over $500.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, the D&D bill on that was like $500, and Evergreen was like, no, we want to make a point.
Yep.
We're taking this. We're gonna we're not, whatever their reasoning is. I mean, and so yeah, that's only $500, and it's ended up in district court, and it might end up, having a huge impact on D&D and the industry, depending on how they find. So,
yep,
you're right. You're right. If the carrier decides, like, I'm going to make a point, they're going to try and make a point. So,
so a story that this is going to feed into my next question. A story that I didn't highlight that actually just came late last night, that we just posted on joc.com last night, also by Michael Angel, was about the FMC deciding to levy a $63 million fine against MSC over some violations it alleges that the carrier partook in, including it wasn't completely around D&D, but including incorrectly billing parties on D&D. So billing the wrong parties on D&D, essentially. And that feeds into the ruling that the FMC came out with was it in February or March? I think it was in February. Yeah.
It was the end of February.
Yeah, this is right before TPM, I remember. It was they issued a final rulemaking that was delayed several months. I think it was supposed to initially come out last August, around billing and who could be billed. And essentially what they clarified was that detention demurrage bills have to go to the party that's on the contract, not a provider that one of the parties works with. So my question to you is that a good ruling from the perspective of simplifying the dispute process? Is it a good ruling just in general, in your view?
I think it rights some wrongs, but it opens up maybe the door for some others. We're gonna have to see how it's applied practically by the FMC and by the carriers.
Yeah.
Before I think we're gonna really see how it shakes out. A lot of drayage. I had somebody come to me. They're paying off monthly a six-figure bill for a BCO, and they had no contractual obligation with the carrier, but the carrier said, hey, we're gonna give you this like a multi-six-figure bill, and you have to pay for it or you get shut out. So they're paying that off monthly.
And the drayage provider has to pay that bill because they want to keep the shipper as the customer, right? Like there's all these commercial entanglements that influence why, you would say in a vacuum, well, why is the drayage provider even paying this bill? It's the shipper that owes it. Well, because they want to keep them as a customer.
Exactly. And they can't afford to get shut out. I mean, I worked with one company, they did get shut out, and they have to hire a third party basically just to go pull the container for them, and then they kind of like take it over from there. But they have to pay that company to go pull for them. All because these carriers said like, you're on the front line, so we're going to stick you with the bill. And I think one of the biggest things we're going to see come out of this is the importance of the relationship between like truckers and shippers, because truckers are very much now the front line, and they're the first line of defense for shippers when it comes to proving too, that these charges are bunk. Like if there are no appointments available or something like that, it's going to be up to the trucker to be able to provide the shipper with proof of that, so the shipper can fight it.
That's a very interesting point. The audit trail to me seems to be like the most important aspect of this now, aside from the
and it always starts with the truckers.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna again, the good truckers basically already do this, but it's not their job. They're running businesses. They don't have the time to sit there, and I don't know what they have to do to gather proof for their shipper. What kind of proof is acceptable? I saw an NVO friend of mine sent me the list of like demands from a carrier as to what they would consider proof. It was insane. It was like gobbledygook. Must be a timestamp in the quarter-inch quadrant of the right-hand side of your screen. It was just this huge list. It's like, who can do that? In the heat of the moment, you're running a business. Like, who has the infrastructure for that?
Right.
So I think and the forwarder said something to them, and they said, well, our lawyers drew it up. Okay, like what does that mean? It means they made it as difficult as possible, probably, to protect you.
Right.
So the truckers are going to be the first line for the shippers, and I think they really have to kind of consider that moving forward.
Yep.
That they are the most important part of this process, really, because they're where you get the proof, they're where you get the evidence, and it's not their job, and it sucks. It sucks to say like, hey, do all this extra stuff to help the shipper, even though it's not part of your job and you're busy. But unfortunately, that's just the way it is. I think also too on the shipper side, I don't know until it starts happening, and it's we see real world effects. But I think if you're a consignee who has put your forwarder or whomever in charge of doing everything for you, I'd be really kind of like cognizant of the fact that like I might get stuck with a bill for something that I had nothing to do with. You told the forwarder and the NVO to do this, but let's say the NVO just doesn't care, and they let all this D&D accrue, and it was a door move, and they're supposed to be handling it for you.
Yep.
And the carriers just blanket, let's say, send the bill to the consignee because that's easier. I hope we don't see a lot of that, but I think we might kind of see like some NVO and shipper finger pointing when the bills start.
I agree. I think all even the best intentioned rules and laws always have unintended consequences, and like I totally agree with you. This is gonna there's gonna be a whole bunch of new things that shake out of this. So all right, I have time for maybe one more question, and then my wrap up question for every guest that I have. But so I've just appointed you through executive order D&D czar, U.S. D&D czar. What on day one you have unilateral power to change everything, to enforce whatever you want. What are the things you do?
First thing I do is I make everybody who works at the FMC sit through a supply chain workshop.
Okay.
So that they understand how it works on a practical daily basis. I think there's kind of a there's kind of a disconnect when you don't have actual practical experience and you're approaching things purely academically. There's always going to be kind of that disconnect.
Okay.
And I think that's an issue actually, and also in the adjudication of a lot of these disputes. I had somebody at the FMC tell me that the shipper could have just called the terminal themselves to get an appointment for the trucker,
Sure.
or it was something similar to that. And I was like,
Seems
not
easy.
really,
Seems easy.
things like that. So when you don't have like that kind of experiential knowledge, so that's the first thing I would do, honestly. And it sounds kind of, I mean, odd, but I think it would be very helpful just to the community as a whole, to kind of, I don't want to use, I think educate is condescending in in a way, but kind of, make people more aware of
Give them a
like the
window
everyday
into the
practical.
operational realities of like a day to day. I agree. I
Yeah,
think.
because it affects what they do in
Yep.
their work every day.
Yep.
And if you're working off of assumptions, but you've never booked a container, like if you've never booked a container, even like a day in your life, you're working off of assumptions all the time, right?
Yep.
So I think that would be honestly the first thing I would do, because I think that they would then understand it a little bit more, and it would inform their decision making a little bit differently.
They should also have to sit in the CFO's office of all these companies and see like how much cash is tied up. Whether it's the BCO and it's their problem ultimately, but their cash is tied up, or it's the intermediary and it really shouldn't be their problem, but their cash is still tied up. So
Yes, or go to one of these small forwarders where a $6,000 bill might be somebody's salary next month,
yeah,
that
yeah,
you can't afford because you're having to pay this $6,000 bill. I think, we think of multi-billion dollar carriers and huge BCOs all the time. The majority of the people impacted by D&D are these smaller companies, and
yeah.
it's a death by a thousand cuts, $6,000 here, $2,000 here, $1,000 here. When you're a small business, I mean, it's not dramatic to say that that could literally be your business. If you can't make payroll the next month, or,
Yep.
you've got your own bills to pay and your own family to feed. So I think, we get caught up sometimes in these big names. But, the majority of the shipping world are people we're never going to hear their name. And,
Small.
So.
I only got through like half the questions I wanted to ask you, but that's okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a talker.
We'll have a part. No, there's just so much to talk about. Honestly, there's part. We'll need a part 2 on this. I ask this of every guest. This is my last question for every guest. Who's your favorite band or musician, and you have to tell me why.
Liz Phair.
Oh,
Actually.
good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Probably not a common answer, right?
Yeah, definitely the first time she's been mentioned, but yeah.
I've loved her since high school, and none of my friends were into that music, so I go to the concerts by myself. Every time she has a show nearby, I go and
Exile
see
in
her.
Guyville, right? That's the seminal album from her, right?
Yeah, that's her masterpiece. Yes, the one that's always on the lists and everything like that. It's incredible, but she's a storyteller. I mean, even when she went a little bit more pop, which, other people got mad at, I don't really care about that stuff. I don't gatekeep, but even with her more pop stuff, if you really listen to the lyrics, she's telling a story, and it's like really deep. And so I just always kind of it always elicits something in me, whether it's like humor or, anger or sadness. And so I really think that's why I love her so much. And she has kind of changed from Exile in Guyville, which I guess was like more like the 90s kind of like female alternative, right? Like type of music. And then she experimented more with a kind of more commercial, like pop stuff. I was watching a show called The 100 on the CW, and it said like she helped with the music. I was like, well, I was
Oh,
like, good for
interesting.
her. That's
Well, my 11-year-old son loves listening to the station on Sirius that plays 90s and 2000s. So that she comes on all the time, and I think he knows like 2 of her songs. So
well, hopefully
we're
it's
passing
none
to the
of the
next
really bad
generation.
ones.
Yeah. Sarah, it's been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for making time today. How can people reach out to you?
Sarah, so Sara, Sarah no H at 411 spelled out .io or LinkedIn. I'm pretty much glued to my LinkedIn messaging. You can reach us there either on our company page or my personal page. I always just answer from that most of the time. But it
Cool.
was great being here, Eric. I appreciate it. Probably people know a little bit more than they wanted to know about this. But
No,
you're right,
there's so
it's
much
very.
more. There's actually so much more that needs to be talked about. But thank you so much, Sarah. It's awesome to have you on, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Thank you, Eric. Have a
Yep.
good one.
Yep. All right. Well, we are right at the end of time. I think just enough time for my dad joke of the week. All right. Let me you ready for this one? What do you call a short mother? I'll give you a second. You may think about it. Minimum. Get it? Mini-mum. I thought that was pretty good. I stole that from one of these Instagram dad joke reels that pop up on my feed all the time. I think they like know that I like dad jokes now, so it's just those. All I get is dad jokes, guys telling dad jokes to one another. So, anyway, thank you to Sarah. Awesome conversation. This D&D saga seemingly will stretch on for the rest of time after the Earth has burned out. I think we'll still be talking about D&D, but hopefully not. Hopefully there will be some resolution to this. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another great episode, another great guest. You're definitely going to want to tune in for that. Thank you to everyone who supports the show. Thank you to my producer, Nicole, who's amazing. Thank you to Sarah and the whole Let's Talk Supply Chain team. But most of all, thank you to all of you. Have a great weekend, everyone. It's spring. Hopefully it's sunny where you are. Have a great weekend. Bye, all.